We are living in an age of outrage. Outrage culture has enticed people far and wide and even affected us in the church. Pete Ross calls our anger and outrage an acceptable and addictive drug of society. Our outrage convinces us that we're smart, that we're right, that we have the best ideas and ways of fixing everybody and everything else. We're self-righteous and we're the ones who need to be in charge. We might even expect people who don't know Christ to expect outrage over everything they don't agree with, but is that to be our response as Christians? Ed Setzer notes in his book, Christians in the Age of Outrage, that deep political divisions and echo chambers are making communication more difficult and taints what starts out as disagreement with hostility and hatred. Now, an echo chamber is where a person comes across information or opinions that reflect and reinforce their own perspective. Echo chambers tend to create misinformation and distort perspective so that a person has difficulty considering opposing viewpoints or discussing complicated topics. Setzer says, the first cause of our outrage stems from the increasingly polarization of American society in terms of both religion and politics. The second cause lies in the unprecedented advance of technology that has completely altered almost every facet of our daily lives in less than a generation. For example, nobody had an iPhone on June 28th, 2007, but the world was inalterably changed the next day when the iPhone was unveiled. Greater access to what any one person is thinking and the vitriol with which it is expressed ends up inflaming the whole world. The biggest problem with outrage is that it's been weaponized. Outrage sells like crazy because it's highly emotional, and emotions affect what people do. That's why political parties, rather than coming together to find solutions, whip their supporters into a frenzy of anger against the other side. That's why certain stories are newsworthy. The more provocative the emotional content, the more viewers and the higher the ratings. The way of outrage is the way of belligerence, the way of lacking self-control, the way of slander and self-righteousness. It's the way of imposing my will and thinking on everybody else. It's the way of pride. And the Bible shows us a better way. Proverbs 11:12 says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with the humble is wisdom. The way of wisdom is the way of humility, compassion, patience, long-suffering. It's the way of holiness, not haughtiness. Now, not all outrage is off limits to believers. As Christians, we should be appalled at the depravity and brokenness and misguided beliefs and actions of people in our world. That's why we pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's Jesus' statement of outrage for a confused and lost world. So we must not be among those who cause violence with either our words or actions against any person that's made in the image of God. There's one place where the full force of our outrage can be directed, and that's towards our own indwelling sin. As John Owen said, be killing sin or it will be killing you. Rather than outward spewing our rage at everyone we disagree with, we need to focus our attention on any inward sin waiting to destroy everything that we love. And so Paul says in Romans 8:13 and 14, for if you live according to the sinful nature, you will die. But if by the Spirit you will put to death the misdeeds of the body, then you will live, because those who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. Sons and daughters of God live differently. So are you going to yield to the pride of your sinful nature and join the outrage culture, a culture that loves sin and hates its neighbor? Or will you aim your outrage at the sin within, and by the power of the Spirit, put to death the deeds of the body and attitudes of the sinful nature? So how do you respond to disagreement? What are you supposed to do? Jesus gets our outrage, but he has a different approach. In Matthew 5, Jesus shows us the ways of God's kingdom transcend normal human interactions. He shows us a better way. He does this by quoting the Old Testament by saying, "Now you have heard that it was said," and then showing us a better way. "But I tell you," we are to display a righteousness that touches people's hearts and exceeds far too common religious attitudes. We're to make different choices. We're to choose generosity over outrage. We're to choose sacrificial service over resistance. We're to choose love over hate. So as Jesus says, choose generosity over outrage. And so here's what he says in Matthew 5:38 through 40. "You have heard that it was said, 'Eye for eye and tooth for tooth.' But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well." Now the saying, "eye for an eye," comes from Exodus 21:24, and it was about making the punishment fit the crime, not to exceed it. Now, there were times, of course, when people exacted vengeance greater than what the victim had experienced. Jesus introduces a whole new principle. Be generously kind instead of giving straightforward tit-for-tat retribution when you've been hurt. Outrage or retribution is not the way of his kingdom. Two examples of this generosity that he mentions are turning the other cheek and giving of clothing. Warren Wiersbe says, Jesus replaced a law with an attitude. Be willing to suffer loss yourself rather than to cause another to suffer. When Jesus says, do not resist an evil person, does that mean we should be completely passive and let somebody do whatever they want to us? If they threaten our family, do we just sort of stand back and watch? Should we never stand up for our rights? Well, that's not really what he's saying. When he drove the money changers out of the temple, he wasn't being passive. When Paul demanded his rights as a Roman citizen, he wasn't being passive. In this context, where he says, do not resist an evil person, resist means don't retaliate against them. Jesus is talking about revenge, not self-preservation. He isn't telling us to be weak and passive. He's telling us not to be vindictive. Skye Jethany says, the issue here is not whether or not we resist evil. We are called to be agents of righteousness and justice in the world. The question is, why do we pursue righteousness and justice? Jesus forbids us from pursuing it out of anger, hatred, or vengeance. We pursue righteousness and justice and goodness because we love God and we love others, even the perpetrators of these evils. So I don't want you walking away thinking this means you just have to tolerate everything that happens to you. It means that in everything, we seek what is good for the other and not just ourselves. Striking a person on the right cheek suggests a backhanded slap, and it was a typical form of Jewish insult. Proverbs 12:16 says, a prudent man overlooks an insult. Jesus tells us not to trade insults, even if it means receiving more ourselves. It doesn't mean that we submit to physical danger or abuse. But being a follower of Jesus means choosing kindness over outrage, generosity over stinginess, patience over retaliation. Those kinds of responses are going to stand out in a world full of outrage. 1 Peter 3:9 says, "Do not repay evil with insult or injury, but with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you might inherit a blessing." Don't be like Eugene Peterson and how he decided to deal with the school bully when he was a kid, Garrison Johns. This is what he says happened. He says, "I hit him in the face with my fist. It felt good. And I hit him again. Blood spurted from his nose, a lovely crimson on the snow. By this time, all the other children were cheering me, egging me on. Black out his eye, bust out his teeth." A torrent of vengeful invective poured from them. I said to Garrison, "Say uncle." He wouldn't say it. I hit him again. More blood, more cheering. And then my Christian training reasserted itself. I said to him, "Say I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior." And he said it. Garrison Johns was my first Christian convert. Well, Jesus' way is to give his own blood for us, not to bloody somebody else up. Some of you may remember this, if you live here in Illinois anyhow. Back in March of 2009, Pastor Fred Winters of the First Baptist Church in Maryville, Illinois, a southern Illinois city, was shot and killed during the Sunday morning service. And this was before, a lot of shootings were going on in churches. A week after this happened, his wife, Cindy Winters, was interviewed by Julie Chen from The Early Show on CBS. When Chen asked about her husband's killer, Winters spoke only about forgiveness. This is what she said. She says, "I do not have any hatred or even hard feelings toward him. We've been praying for him. One of the first things that my daughter said to me after this happened was, 'I hope that he comes to learn to love Jesus through all of this.' We are not angry at all, and we really firmly believe that he can find peace and forgiveness, and peace through this by coming to know Jesus. And we hope that happens for him." Jesus also says, choose sacrifice over resistance. Verses 41 to 42, Matthew 5. "If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." You probably heard someone say, you need to go the 2nd mile. Well, when Jesus spoke these words, everybody would have understood what he was talking about. In Roman-occupied lands, Roman law gave a Roman soldier the right to force a civilian to carry his pack for 1 mile. They had to carry it for 1 mile, and that was it. So people would begrudgingly do just that. As soon as they got to that mile marker, they would drop the pack, and that would be it. But Jesus told his followers, go beyond what is required. Don't just carry the pack 1 mile, go the 2nd mile. There's no greater way to show God's love than to be sacrificially kind, especially to somebody who hasn't been kind to you. Someone once said you can tell whether you have the heart of a servant by how you act when someone treats you like one. Jesus revealed his heart in being mistreated. Isaiah spoke about how Jesus would sacrificially give of himself when he was hurt by others. This is what it says in Isaiah 53. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So Jesus is not saying that you now have to walk the second mile, and that you have to turn the other cheek, and you have to turn over your tunic and cloak. He's not saying that you have to do these things. What he's saying is that when you're set free from anger and hatred and evil, when vengeance itself has no root in your heart, when you have been completely rehabilitated, your heart has been changed, these are the kinds of things you want to do. You will love others so much that you want to do what's truly good for them. You want to walk the second mile. You want to turn the other cheek. You want to give of those who ask of you. Jesus is not laying out another law for us to obey. He's illustrating what a truly rehabilitated heart looks like. Heather Burke Brody blogs, she says, I was thrift shopping for dorm stuff. The cashier appeared to be one of the most unhappy, maddest people I've ever seen. I was 6 people deep in line, and it seemed like she was becoming more and more exasperated with each passing customer. She was especially incensed when one of my unmarked items needed a price check. But as she ran up my items, I felt a soul nudge. I tried to bargain with Jesus and told him that the extra little bit of cash in the backside of my wallet was not meant for her. It surely should go to someone sweeter and kinder, more deserving, or at least appreciative. Not someone downright mean and angry. But God did not budge. She says the human heart filled with the presence of God is our best compass, so I paid my bill and reluctantly found the backside of my wallet. I slipped her some cash and she handed me my receipt. She was caught off guard by the gesture. She gripped the folded bill with one hand and paused, then slid her mask down, and with the other hand, her loud, stern voice got quiet when she whispered a single word. Why? To which I answered 2 words back, soul nudge. There was another pause, a brief reckoning of sorts. When she grabbed my hand and held on, I was the one who was caught off guard. She said, today's my 75th birthday, and ain't nobody called me. Not my sister, none of my kids, none of these people here. Nobody, nothing. I don't think I can even remember being so sad. Ain't nobody even remembers. It's my birthday. Well, I'll tell you what, God remembered, and he caused the heart of one of his servants to show that he cared. Jesus did not respond with outrage, but with God's grace. Give people more than they expect. Give it when they least expect it. Instead of resisting people who treat you unkindly, serve them with the love of Jesus and show them the hope that we have in Christ. Jesus also says, choose love over hate. And so here's what he says in Matthew 5:43-48. You've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your Father in heaven is perfect. The world's way of relating is to love the people who love you and hate the people who hate you. But that's not Jesus' way. He says, love everybody, especially your enemies. Love your enemies. Pray for your persecutors. Praying for people who are hurting you is certainly an act of love. Love is more than a feeling. It's an act of the will to love everybody, regardless of how they treat us and whether they love us or not. Jesus makes a couple of points about this kind of love. You know, such love is the mark of mature people, not spiritual babes. When we love like God loves, we're just like our Father, who gives good gifts like rain to both the righteous and the unrighteous. Giving this kind of love is also a testimony to others. We're never more like God, and we never reveal more who God is than when we love those who don't love us. He says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, of course, when we hear the word perfect, that sounds impossible to us because we know we'll never be perfect. You know, certainly not perfect like God. But the Greek word for perfect means to reach an intended end or completion. In other places in the Bible, it's translated as mature. A person is spiritually mature when they've reached their intended end, you know, when they fulfill the purpose for which God created them. In this context, Jesus is saying you can be perfect, you can fulfill your purposes in life, you can demonstrate your maturing that you have by loving your enemies. We're never more like God than when we love those who don't love us. Thomas Merton says, do not be too quick to assume that your enemy is a savage just because he's your enemy. Perhaps he's your enemy because he thinks you are a savage. Or perhaps he's afraid of you because he feels you are afraid of him. And perhaps if he believed you were capable of loving him, he would no longer be your enemy. So don't be too quick to assume that your enemy is an enemy of God just because he's your enemy. Perhaps he's your enemy precisely because he can find nothing in you that gives glory to God. Perhaps he fears you because he can find nothing in you of God's love and God's kindness and God's patience and mercy and understanding of weakness of men. Do not be too quick to condemn the man who no longer believes in God, for it is perhaps your own coldness and avarice and mediocrity and materialism and sensuality and selfishness that have killed his faith. Max Lucado tells about a muscle-bound man named Daniel who was swindled by his own brother. He vowed that if he ever saw him again, he was going to break his neck. Well, a few months later, Daniel became a Christian, and even so, he still couldn't forgive his brother. Well, one day the inevitable happened, and he saw him on a busy street corner. This is how Daniel described what happened. He says, I saw him, but he didn't see me. I felt my fists clench and my face got red hot. My initial impulse was to grab him around the throat and choke the life out of him. But as I looked into his face, my anger began to melt. For as I saw him, I saw the image of my Father. I saw my Father's eyes. I saw my Father's look. I saw my Father's expression. And as I saw my Father in his face, my enemy once again became my brother. The brother found himself wrapped in those big arms in a hug. The two stood in the middle of the river of people and wept. Daniel's words bear repeating. When I saw the image of my Father in his face, my enemy became my brother. We are never more like our Father than when we love those who don't love us, when we refuse to retaliate, when we seek to make restitution for our own wrongs, when we respond to mistreatment with kindness, when we're generous toward everyone who needs it. That's how we show his love. We become perfect like our Father when we love like he loves, when we give like he gives, when we sacrifice like he sacrifices. Oh Lord Jesus, our heart really gets tested when we come up against something that makes us angry on the inside. And Lord, I know some of the things that we get angry about, we should get angry about, particularly when people are mistreated. But Father, many times when things are directed towards us, we get angry in a way that doesn't please you, that doesn't honor you. What people need to see is you in us. And so give us the wisdom to respond just as we have spoken, to love as you love, to give as you give, to sacrifice as you've sacrificed, that you might touch people's hearts, beginning with our own, and change people's lives, ours included. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.